Good morning and welcome to BBC Parliament and the state opening of Parliament. And as you can see, we're looking at the Royal Gallery in the House of Lords and also the chamber of the House of Lords, the throne at the end, designed by Augustus Pugin, the chamber of the Lords filled with peers. And from here, the Queen will deliver her speech from the throne outlining the government's legislative programme for the coming year. We are exactly halfway through this Parliament, 2.5 years exactly into the Parliament. Not many governments go the full 5 years. This one could easily have gone after 2. But we are halfway through this Parliament. And can I just say to those who are watching at about this time last week when we'd hoped to show prorogation, once again, many apologies, but it looks as if we have both a combination of the wonder of electricity and the magic of television to bring you this morning's ceremony in all its glory. And I'm joined by Lord Faulkner of Thoroton, whom people have called the last real Lord Chancellor. It's lovely to have you here, but
Daniel,
are you sorry to be here? But are you sorry not to be down there?
Very sorry not to be there, doing the job of Lord Chancellor in the ceremony.
Now here is the Queen Alexandra's state coach coming down Whitehall, the regalia procession with the crown, the sword of state and the cap of maintenance. This procession before the Queen's procession. Queen Alexandra state coach, 4 bay horses. 4 bay horses called Mary Tudor, Concord, Ensign and Lahore. And they've got square buckle harnesses, and the coachman Kevin Hutchinson. Inside the Lords we can see the judges and also the thrones. The Queen's throne on the left, designed by Pugin, and the throne on the right, a copy made in 1901. Pugin was very unkeen on the idea that the consort's throne should have similar status, so he designed quite a small chair for Prince Albert. And there, the House of Lords chamber, and there is the crown, the imperial state crown. Together you can just see the sword of state there alongside it. And the regalia procession pulling into Old Palace Yard. The front coach, Queen Alexandra state coach with the crown, and the second coach, the town coach, 2 bay horses, Pearl and Merlin, with the mace bearers, Sergeant-at-Arms from the Buckingham Palace, not the Sergeant-at-Arms who work at the Palace of Westminster. And here, the Gentlemen-at-Arms, the closest bodyguard to the sovereign, as the Queen Alexandra state coach pulls into the Victoria Tower. Coachman gets down. And the crown jeweller just coming into the shop there, and he's going to collect the crown. That's Harry Collins of Collins & Sons, based in Tunbridge Wells, a new crown jeweller this year. It was previously Asprey, and they've decided after a long period with them to go to a small family firm in Tunbridge Wells. And this is Harry Collins' first year as crown jeweller. The crown is now with the barge master, Paul Ludwig, because once upon a time this regalia was brought down the Thames by barge for state opening, and he hands the crown over to Lieutenant Colonel Andrew Ford, controller of the Lord Chamberlain's department, who is in charge of many of the ceremonials at Buckingham Palace, the imperial state crown. It's carried on a small cushion. And this is the Royal Gallery. And this is the ceiling inside the Royal Gallery, with the 2 pictures of great British victories, Nelson at Trafalgar and Wellington at Waterloo. And there is Wellington. They're badly faded, actually, these pictures. They are hundreds and hundreds of feet long. They're not hundreds of feet long, but they are very, very long indeed. But they have badly faded over the years, which is a pity. But they commemorate two very distinguished victories. And there, the Imperial State Crown, surrounded by the Gentlemen-at-Arms, and behind that, the Cap of Maintenance on the right and the Sword of State on the left. Disappears into a little room at the foot of the Norman staircase, where the Crown Jeweller will actually inspect it to see that everything is okay, give it a final polish, and actually put it onto a larger cushion before he takes it up to the Royal Gallery. So here are the two thrones in the House of Lords and various members of the diplomatic corps looking down from the galleries above the chamber. Three peers chatting away. They're not peeresses, peers in their own right. Women peers are peers. They're not peeresses. It's a magnificent sight, Lord Faulkner.
It is, with everybody brought together. Soon the royal family, the Queen, will arrive, and there's peers, judges, bishops, soon the Commons. It must be the only occasion where every part of the state apparatus is brought together in one chamber. And
it is a living version of the Constitution.
It is exactly that. And one of the best bits is the polite peers and the monarch, and then you hear the sound of a mob coming towards them, and that's the Commons walking along.
Well, before the mob, let's introduce the Prime Minister's wife, Sarah Brown, who's up in the gallery. And next to her is Margaret Vaughan. We didn't manage to see her, I'm sorry. So here comes the Imperial State Crown. It's been carried by Andrew Ford, Controller Lord Chamberlain's office. 2,868 diamonds, 17 sapphires, 11 emeralds, 5 rubies, and 273 pearls. And the 317-carat Star of Africa is in the front of the band, and the 104-carat Stuart sapphire is also there. He's carrying it up the Norman staircase and now through into the Royal Gallery, where he'll hand it over to the care of the Lord Great Chamberlain, the Queen's representative at the Palace of Westminster for the royal parts of the Palace of Westminster, the remaining royal sections of the palace, of which the Royal Gallery is one. Now the Crown is accompanied by 2 yeomen of the guard. Lord Great Chamberlain receives the crown and he will place it on its own cushion in the Royal Gallery, and it will stay there until the Queen leaves Buckingham Palace, and at that very point he will take it into the robing room. Lord Saatchi talking with Lord Denham. 2 Conservative peers. I'm told Nigella Lawson is a guest today at state opening. Lady Hooper, I think, behind them.
That's right, Lord Turner. They mix up Conservatives and Labour together. All parties are mixed together in the Lords.
So it's all a friendly day.
It's all friendly all the time, but it's a friendly day particularly today.
And we have... There is the Imperial State Crown. Magnificent sight. You see the Stuart sapphire at the back there. And at Buckingham Palace, the Queen's procession is underway. In the Royal Gallery, the Cap of Maintenance is put in its special little place before it is borne in the procession. The Cap of Maintenance was essentially a present from the Pope, to a sort of gold star for doing good work to Henry VIII. And when the break with Rome, it was shown as a kind of trophy after that. And behind the cap there, the Sword of State. Chamber of the House of Lords. It always looks rather bigger than it actually is on television, doesn't it?
I think when you get inside it, it always seems very, very small. I think looking at it in telly without anybody in it, it looks very large. Inside, when you're actually engaged in activity, it seems more intimate.
The judges here, do they turn up every day?
They don't turn up every day, no, and very few of them are members of the House of Lords. The vast majority of these will be judges at first instance from the Court of Appeal, and they're brought to be the lions under the throne, the people supporting the monarch. So that when the Lord Chancellor falls over as he walks backwards, the judges are there to pick him up and put him back in his place.
And here the procession of the heralds, led by Garter, King of Arms. Behind him, Norroy and Ulster, King of Arms, on the left, Clarenceau, King of Arms, on the right. They're the three senior heralds, then the heralds themselves, Patrick Dickinson, Richmond Herald, the third one along there. He's the Earl Marshal's secretary, the Earl Marshal being the Duke of Norfolk, who organises this state ceremonial. So the three Kings of Arms, Garter, Norroy and Ulster, and Clarenceau, and then the heralds, Richmond, Windsor, Chester, and all the others. And behind them, the pursuivants, the junior heralds, Blue Mantle, Rouge Croix, Rouge Dragon. They work at the College of Arms in the City of London, mainly working on genealogy day to day. Back in the Lords, the wags, Lord Chancellor, if we may rudely call them that.
These are the wives of the peers who sit
Wags.
in this... Well, I don't know if there are many girlfriends there, which is the AGS bit. But these are the wives of peers who come and sit in the chamber, not beside their husbands, but in amongst the peers.
And it must be... Did your wife come to this
She
ceremony?
did, yes, every year when I was Lord Chancellor, and some years before as well.
At this time, you're preparing for your procession. Now, whereabouts would you be located in the palace at this time?
I would be waiting...
About a minute or two before your procession, 6 minutes before.
I would be at the door waiting to greet Her Majesty the Queen on her arrival, because she's greeted...
You haven't arrived yet, I think.
No,
That's a few minutes to go. The Baroness Scotland, the Attorney General.
Yes.
Talking to Lord Ali.
Indeed.
I think the Lord Chancellor's procession comes in about 6 minutes' time.
From his room through to the bottom of the stairs, that's right.
So I think you haven't quite...
But I'm in the building.
You're in the building.
And I'm about to go through the Prince's chamber to get to the bottom of the stairs.
So the Lord Chancellor's still in the building. That's reassuring news.
Particularly for the building.
And particularly for the Queen. The Office of Attorney General is undergoing some change, isn't it?
It is. A consultation paper has been...
Lord
Aradazi
the
is one
Health
of the,
Minister.
Indeed.
One of Gordon Brown's big tent ministers, not a member of the...
I think now a member of the Labour Party, previously not, an active consultant engaged in the practice of medicine in London.
In fact, he has a day off to continue his surgery, doesn't he?
Precisely right, that's right.
And the ambassadors. The ambassadors, of course, not here normally every day, but almost every country ambassador turns up for this.
Indeed. And they sit right in the centre of the chamber, or some of them do.
David Steele, Lord Steele of Akewood, one of the few people, there are a few, who've sat in 3 chambers in the United Kingdom. First of all, the House of Commons, then the House of Lords, and then the Scottish Parliament, where he was presiding officer.
That's right.
And it was his 1967 bill, 40 years ago, that reformed the abortion laws. His Abortion Act. A little bit of talk at the moment about reforming that. He said he is interested to see the way medical opinion goes on that. When we look at the makeup of the House of Lords, it is now all almost entirely life peers.
That's right.
We've just got a smattering of dukes, 2 dukes, I think, the Duke of Montrose and the Duke of Norfolk.
That's right. 92 hereditary peers still there, but elected by their fellow hereditary peers.
There's one Marquis, and that is the Lord Great Chamberlain, the Marquis of Cholmondeley, but he isn't at all a regular attender in the House of Lords.
And indeed, he's not elected by his peers. He's there because he's a great office holder of state.
Together with the Earl Marshal, he has a place as of right in the House of Lords.
That's right.
The 92 hereditaries are still there. There's often talk of reform of the House of Lords. I'm not going to tempt my guest into him, but he looked at it a great number of times in your time as Lord Chancellor. Shall we say that?
I did, and I think one of the questions is how do you deal with these 92 hereditaries who do a splendid job in the House of Lords? Nobody feels that in terms of merit that they should be removed.
The Archbishop of Canterbury, Rowan Williams, there.
That's right. Talking to the judges. The judges and the church come together.
Well, everyone comes together, as you indeed say.
You're right. But the judges knocking knees with the bishops and the archbishops.
It's quite close there, isn't it?
Very close. The judges
Quite cosy.
the judges are on the woolsack, and on the bishops and archbishops are on one bench. Here's the speaker.
Procession of the Lord Speaker. The mace of the House of Lords carried by Keith Phipps, principal doorkeeper of the House of Lords, former quartermaster sergeant of the Coldstream Guards. And the Lord Speaker has a train bearer, because we believe the Lord Chancellor has lost his train bearer, but there still seems to be work for train bearers. Lord Winston, sitting next to the Liberal hereditary Lord Redesdale.
Correct.
Thank you.
I'm here to keep an eye on you, Dave.
That's most thoughtful of you. I now rather wonder, would it be easier if you were just doing the procession in the House of Lords? The Lord Speaker, Lady Hayman, took office on the 4th of July 2006. You will remember the day well.
Very well indeed. It was a very historic day when the Lord Chancellor handed over the speakership of the House of Lords to somebody the Lords had elected themselves.
And she's greeted by the Earl Marshal there on the right, the Duke of Norfolk, and Black Rod, Lieutenant General Michael Wilcox, Gentleman Usher of the Black Rod, to give him his full title. And he is, incidentally, Sergeant-at-Arms of the House of Lords as well. And joining the group as well, the Lord Privy Seal, the Minister for Women and the Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, Harriet Harman. She seems very admiring of the Lord Speaker's robes. The Lord Privy Seal is a strange job because, following an Act of Parliament in Victorian times, all the duties of the Lord Privy Seal were removed. It remains a great officer of state. It's a useful job for a Prime Minister to hand out to someone. He wants someone in their cabinet, but there are absolutely no duties of the Privy Seal now. The Privy Seal is no longer used. Some of the exquisite detail work in the Palace of Westminster, done by Augustus Welby Pugin. Essentially what you see in the palace on the outside is the work of Barry, Charles Barry, but the interior and this magnificent ceiling of the roof of the House of Lords was all Pugin's work. It really was his life's creation. But the only job he actually held formally as part of the team was Superintendent of Woodwork. But he did some magnificent woodwork, including the cloth of estate above the thrones, which you can just see there. Almost everything you see inside the Palace of Westminster is the work of Pugin. And now we go outside into Whitehall, and approaching the cenotaph, the procession of the Queen. And there are kind of 2 days, two kind of weathers for state opening. There's the manky, dreich November day, which is damp and dark. And then there's this one, bright, sunny, autumn day, a bit chilly, deep blue sky. And I'm glad to say we have that one. We have here 2 former members of the government.
One a current member, Lord Treesman.
Lord Treesman is a current member, I'm sorry. I'm glad you are here to correct me.
And Lord Haskell.
Lord Haskell, who certainly took office in 1997, very early on in this Labour government. Now, you're quite right. Now, this is the time pretty well for your procession, and here it is. Antonia Romeo, the Principal Private Secretary of the Lord Chancellor, carrying the mace, and here he is, the Lord High Chancellor of Great Britain and Secretary of State for Justice, the Right Honourable Jack Straw, the first Lord Chancellor from the House of Commons for 273 years. And his purse-bearer, who's actually his events secretary in the Lord Chancellor's department, Angela Highbury.
Helen Asprey.
Helen Asprey. Now, the Lord Chancellor is not wearing a wig, Lord Faulkner.
And doesn't have a train.
What do you think about not wearing the wig?
Well, it's entirely a matter for individual choice. Looking at it from my point of view, it looks like one's not wearing one's pyjama tops. It looks like half the kit.
He told me yesterday that he's not wearing the wig because he isn't a QC, he is a barrister, but he's not a QC, and so he thought it was inappropriate to wear a QC's wig. What do you think about that?
Well, I think, again, speaking from my own experience, the wig and the gown were all part of one outfit, and I think it's very hard to separate the two.
Well, the Lord Chancellor has taken on quite a job for today. He started off, some people will still remember him. He was president of the National Union of Students, 1969 to 1971, and then he went on to be political advisor to Barbara Castle from 1974 to 76, and he's held many of the great offices of state since this government took office in 1997, when he was Home Secretary, 2001 Foreign Secretary, 2005 he became Leader of the House of Commons. Lord Ramsbotham, a thorn in many a government, I think, on prison work. But here is the Queen's procession. The Irish State Coach. 4 grey horses, Daniel, Stevenson, McCarthy and St Anton. And actually they drew the Australian State Coach last year, so they know this route quite well by now. No congestion charge, of course, for horse-drawn carriages in London. And the coachman, John Nelson, from the Royal Mews at Buckingham Palace. It's a magnificent sight as they just come around Parliament Square. Some of the government offices there you can see in the background. And Guard of Honour formed from the Welsh Guards in front of the statue of George V in front of the House of Lords entrance. Sovereign's escort to the Household Cavalry. Not just the Queen's coach in this procession, the glass coach, pulled by 2 greys, and then a state landau, containing members of the Queen's household, the ladies-in-waiting, Master of the Horse, and 2 government whips who are appointed to the household. Majesty of the Queen, wearing the royal diadem created for George IV, but since him, worn by women members of the royal family, and she is accompanied by His Royal Highness the Duke of Edinburgh, in uniform of Admiral of the Fleet. The Irish State Coach is used about 1 in 4 state openings. Normally it's the Australian Stagecoach. The Irish Stagecoach is rather more popular with the gentlemen and women of the Royal Mews because the coachman gets to ride right on the top of it, but it's not as luxurious as the Australian Stagecoach. It's 1 mile from Buckingham Palace to the Palace of Westminster, originally built for the Lord Mayor of Dublin, the coach, but it burnt down actually, and this one is essentially a replica built in the early years of the 20th century. An interior of blue damask and a ceiling covered in blue silk. His Royal Highness Duke of Edinburgh gets out of the coach first. And Her Majesty the Queen arrives at her Palace of Westminster to be greeted by the Lord Great Chamberlain, the Marquis of Cholmondeley, and as her foot touches the ground, the Union Jack descends from the flagpole on top of the Victoria Tower to be replaced by the Royal Standard to indicate that the Queen is in the building. And the herald's procession starts up the Norman staircase. First the pursuivants, then the heralds. Now Black Rod, gentleman usher of the Black Rod, 2 kings of arms, Clarenceux, Norroy and Ulster, 2 sergeants-at-arms from Buckingham Palace, adding to the collection of maces on display here. Garter King of Arms, Peter Gwyn-Jones, the Lord Speaker, Baroness Hayman, with the Lord Privy Seal, Helene Hayman, and the Lord Chancellor, Jack Straw. On your left, the Earl Marshal, the Duke of Norfolk, the Lord Great Chamberlain, the Marquis of Cholmondeley. And the Queen doesn't follow the others, but she heads to the robing room. And in the robing room, the Queen will put on the imperial state crown and her parliamentary robes as 2 doorkeepers close the door. Well, inside the robing room, it's really a tribute to Arthurian legend. The Queen and Duke of Edinburgh looked down on by Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. And there is actually Prince Albert's chair of state, which isn't regularly used now because there is a second throne. And these pictures all around the robing room are of Arthurian legends, incredibly important to what you might call the Victorian neo-Gothicists, the medievalists. They wanted to get their ideas of kingship from medieval England. And these are all scenes of Arthurian legend. Well, so far, the ceremony has gone extremely well. It was rehearsed last night by the Earl Marshal, the Duke of Norfolk, and after that rehearsal, I asked him how it had gone.
The rehearsal went fairly well. There were quite a few new people this year, actually. Jack Straw, Harriet Harman, and others. So there's quite a lot of new ground to cover. So we had a few teething troubles, but I think it went reasonably well.
The motto always seems to be bad rehearsal, good performance.
That quite often follows, actually. So I'm sure tomorrow it will all go extremely well.
A number of people at the rehearsal, of course, noted that the Lord Chancellor decided to walk down backwards from the steps of the throne, having given the speech to the Queen.
Well, I think Lord Chancellor had slight difficulty in working out how to turn round on the second step, having delivered the speech. Maybe tomorrow he'll have worked out how to do that. Well, we shall have to wait and see.
Do you mind which way he walks?
I think as long as he's happy doing it the way he feels most comfortable, I think that's the important thing. And it'll be very interesting to see, as I said, what happens.
You no longer walk backwards.
No, the Lord Great Chamberlain and myself, we walk forwards. We used to walk backwards. I actually myself did it on 2 occasions, just to prove to myself and everybody that I could do it. My father, of course, always used to walk backwards. We decided actually in the late 90s that we should make some changes, and that was a particular change which everyone was keen to see incorporated. So we now walk forwards.
The ceremony always looks to be the same. Is it in fact exactly the same year after year after year?
Predominantly it is the same, but we're always tinkering with elements and trying to, like any production really, trying to refine it, trying to improve it. Occasionally things go wrong, which luckily the BBC and others don't notice, or sometimes you do. But a lot of us who've done it for years, and obviously I and other people are in charge of it, we like to try and make sure it goes right. So we are always tinkering with little things which we're not happy with.
How exacting is the timings?
The timings are pretty exacting, actually. It's quite a full programme of ceremonial to get through in quite a short space of time. And so it's very important that the timings are adhered to.
Last year, for the first time, we gained a procession. We have a Lord Chancellor's procession and a Lord Speaker's procession. Funny enough, people have talked over the years of cutting down on the amount of ceremonial. It's actually grown.
Well, the answer is that it's grown probably unintentionally. It's grown because with the splitting of the roles of the Lord Chancellor, and we now have the Lord Speaker, we've got to, in effect, have in the procession both the Lord Chancellor and the Lord Speaker, and we've got to get them both to the foot of the sovereign staircase for the arrival of the Queen. So we have to have 2 small processions to get them there. It's as simple as that. But it's not us trying to increase ceremonial again. It's merely us being practical to get the 2 people to the right place at the right time.
How nervous are you on the day?
Fairly nervous, actually. I think everyone's quite nervous. And of course, the wonderful thing is when on the day the Queen arrives, and immediately there's that sort of buzz of excitement. and anticipation, and everybody determined to try and play their part. And I think we all feel a little bit nervous, but as soon as she arrives, the whole thing starts and it clicks into gear, and thankfully it normally goes according to plan.
Good luck for tomorrow.
Thank you very much.
The Earl Marshal, the Duke of Norfolk, describing this ceremony. Sarah Brown in the gallery of the House of Lords, looking down, and next to her, Margaret Vaughan, Mrs. Alistair Darling. She's a former journalist, and next to them, Alice Perkins, Mrs. Jack Straw, civil servant. They met at the Department of Social Security in the 1970s when Jack Straw was working for Barbara Castle. And speculation there that the Lord Chancellor might revert to the old practice of walking backwards. I have one person I can check up on that. Is it a good idea? You did it once, didn't you?
I did it once, and I think what the Duke of Norfolk was saying, you want to prove that you can do it. It's quite a strong feeling. I walked backwards on the first year, and after I'd walked backwards, I think the Duke of Norfolk and the Marquis of Cholmondeley said, "That's very good, you've walked backwards, but you make us look like rather crazed modernisers. Would you mind walking forwards in the future?"
So you actually chose the time to walk backwards the very year they had decided finally to walk forwards.
Correct, that's right. So I look like old Labour, and they look rather more modern in that respect. And you see, the Duke of Norfolk was saying to you in that interview, we're very keen that remains incorporated in the ceremony, namely walking forwards.
He did seem quite keen on that.
Yeah.
What about the speech itself? Tell me how it gets from ideas floating around government to the speech delivered by the Queen in the House of Lords.
Well, eventually the Cabinet has to agree what new bills are going to be in the next session.
Lord West there, a Spithead, another of Gordon Brown's big tent of ministers. He's a Home Office Minister, Minister in charge of Security. Sorry, Lord Faulkner.
Indeed, one thinks his name, Lord West of Spithead, sounds more like an extract from the shipping forecast than the name of a peer.
He'll be grateful for your comments.
I'm sure he will. Another one, Lord Malloch Brown there.
Lord Malloch Brown, another member of the big tent group.
Exactly.
Former Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, now a junior Foreign Office Minister.
But who attends the Cabinet. The politicians agree what they want in the speech. The Cabinet Office then turn it into a speech which the monarch could appropriately deliver.
But how do you decide what bills will make it to the speech?
There's something called the Legislative Committee, which seeks to deal with all the bids, because all the departments will bid, and you look a better and stronger department in Whitehall the more bills that you do. Ultimately, disputes are resolved, first of all, at the Legislative Committee, which is chaired by Jack Straw, and if there's a row or it can't be resolved there, then it's resolved in the Cabinet, and the Cabinet eventually decide.
So how many meetings would you expect to have attended as Lord Chancellor on just the content of the Queen's speech?
Many meetings, because this is not something that's arranged in, for example, July. Now they'll be talking about what should be in the Queen's speech for the year after next.
As soon as that?
Yes, it's a very long process. One of the things that will determine, for example, whether a bill gets into the speech is it ready? And if you haven't got an indication that it's in contention, you won't be able to instruct, for example, parliamentary draftsmen and officials to prepare the detail of it. Because although they're referred to in general terms, those bills that are coming are ready for action.
Central lobby, the Palace of Westminster, the procession of the Speaker of the House of Commons. Led by the Sergeant of Arms, Peter Grant Peterkin. This is his last occasion at state opening. The Speaker, Michael Martin, his train bearer, Ian Davis, and the Speaker's Secretary and the Chaplain of the House of Commons. Peter Grant Peterkin leaving the Sergeant-at-Arms job at the end of this year. Substantial reforms going on in the organisation of the House of Commons and how it works, and the Sergeant will no longer be in charge of his department, which is a very big one at the moment. He carries the mace of the House of Commons. Speaker Michael Martin, elected originally as a Labour MP, but now is strictly neutral as the Speaker, and he passes through Members' Lobby, the statue of Churchill and Lloyd George at the entrance to the House of Commons. And indeed, Churchill and Lloyd George are now united again in Parliament Square, where Lloyd George's statue was unveiled last week. Sergeant-at-Arms places the mace on the table of the House of Commons. And the House will now go to prayers, and so we will be barred from the House of Commons for the ceremony of prayers. And the division bells ring to indicate that the House of Commons is in session. And looking at the House of Commons, Black Rod in central lobby, from where he will take the Queen's commands sent via the Lord Great Chamberlain for him to go and fetch the Commons. He is looking directly at the thrones in the House of Lords. The ebony rod, which he holds in his right hand, he's wearing his full state uniform. He doesn't wear this every day, the extra chains of office. And in the Royal Gallery, the state trumpeters of the Household Cavalry. The Lord Great Chamberlain emerges from the robing room to say that the Queen is ready. He'll raise his wand to indicate to the Earl Marshal that all is ready and that the doors should be opened to the robing room. Queen enters the House of Royal Gallery to open the third session of the 54th Parliament of the United Kingdom. The Queen's procession with the Kings of Arms at the front, Sergeants at Arms from Buckingham Palace behind them, the Lord Speaker, the Lord Chancellor, Earl Marshal and Lord Great Chamberlain, the cap of maintenance borne by Baroness Ashton of Up Holland, the Lord President of the Council and Leader of the House of Lords, and the Sword of State, borne by Lord Walker, former Chief of the Defence Staff. Passing the ranks of the Yeomen of the Guard, they pass into Prince's Chamber, where you can see the Gentlemen at Arms with their swan feathers in their helmets. Gentlemen at Arms are retired officers, and the Yeomen of the Guard are retired NCOs. And the procession enters the House of Lords. Jack Straw's first occasion as Lord Chancellor, it is bound to be, Lord Faulkner, a rather nervous-making occasion.
Utterly nerve-wracking. But he's got the Duke of Norfolk to tell him precisely when to move towards the Queen with the speech.
But was this a nervous time?
Very nervous, yes.
What was running through your mind? The nightmare of not having the speech, maybe?
In the purse is the speech. It's a very complicated thing to get inside. My nightmare was I'd open it and it'd be empty and I couldn't find it. The Queen's got a spare one in her handbag.
Does she?
Yes.
So, meeting all eventualities. The Queen will now indicate when she's ready to the Lord Great Chamberlain. Lord Great Chamberlain waves his wand, and Black Rod in central lobby gets the signal, and he heads off to the House Commons. Lieutenant General Michael Wilcox took office in 2001. He's also Sergeant-at-Arms of the House of Lords and Secretary to the Lord Great Chamberlain. The rod itself is 3.5 feet long, black ebony with a gold lion and a crown on top. You can just see it. The other end, there's a gold sovereign, 1902 gold sovereign. And that is the end which he knocks on the door at the House of Commons. Commons have decided to accept the Queen's messenger. Black Rod enters the House of Commons accompanied by the Sergeant-at-Arms.
The Queen commands this honourable House to attend Her Majesty immediately in the House of Peers.
Who shot thee?
Black Rod giving a slight smile there. Dennis Skinner, who by ancient tradition always makes a witty remark at this point, and his witty remark this year was who shot the Harriers? A reference, I think, to the two hen harriers which were shot at Sandringham on the Queen's estate. And Prince Harry has been talking to the police about that. Gordon Brown leads his procession, as it were, with the Leader of the Opposition, David Cameron. The first time they've walked together, they look quite happy together. They're said not to enjoy very good relations. Andrew Lansley there, Shadow Health Minister, Speaker of the House of Commons, Michael Martin, his train bearer, Ian Davis. They seem quite jovial. Vince Cable, the acting leader of the Liberal Democrats, and behind him David Miliband, the Foreign Secretary, who was unable to attend the state visit by the King of Saudi Arabia last week. They're walking through the House of Commons lobby. David Cameron isn't getting many words in, but Gordon Brown is fully apprising him of something. No, there's no opportunity for David Cameron to speak. It's a solo message, I think. William Hague, the Shadow Foreign Secretary, behind the group, chatting rather amiably with the Foreign Secretary, David Miliband. My guest, Lord Faulkner, is intrigued by the body language of the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition.
No, I was rather thinking of why is it that nobody wants to walk with Mr. Vince Cable? Is it because he's only the acting leader, therefore nobody wants to be seen with him?
Perhaps because he boycotted the Saudi Arabian state banquet last year. Piling out of the House of Commons other MPs, Michael Howard, former leader of the Conservatives there. Charles Kennedy, we saw there briefly. Goodness, not even the previous Lib Dem leader but one. Now, there's been a temptation in recent years for MPs to pile in at Central Lobby, and the sergeant told me the other day he was going to put a stop to that. MPs, what they do, they lurk in Central Lobby and wait maybe for the Cabinet and Shadow Cabinet or some of the members to pass by, and then push in front ahead of everyone else who's been in the chamber of the House of Commons to get a good place in the House of Lords, perhaps in the hope that their constituents will see them on the television. The result has been that the Cabinet has often got a bit left behind, but I think on this occasion rather more members have made it through. You must be at this point, Lord Faulkner, as Lord Chancellor, at your most jittery.
You're waiting for a tap on the shoulder from the Duke of Norfolk, who judges when there are enough members of Parliament at the bar of the House of Lords to justify starting the process whereby the Lord Chancellor walks up the steps to hand the monarch the speech. And here he goes.
My Lords and members of the House of Commons, my government will take forward policies to respond to the rising aspirations of the people of the United Kingdom, to ensure security for all, and to entrust more power to Parliament and the people. My government's programme will meet people's aspirations for better education, housing, healthcare and children's services, and for a cleaner environment. My government is committed to raising educational standards, and giving everyone the chance to reach their full potential. A bill will be introduced to ensure that young people stay in education or training until the age of 18, and to provide new rights to skill training for adults. Draft legislation will be brought forward to reform apprenticeships. Available and affordable housing is one of my government's main priorities. Legislation will be introduced to create a new Homes and Communities Agency that will deliver more social and affordable housing and promote regeneration. There will also be a bill to reform the planning system, providing for quicker and more transparent decision-making. My government is committed to providing a healthcare system organised around the needs of the patient. Legislation will be introduced to create a stronger health and social care regulator with a remit to ensure clean and safe services and high-quality care. A bill will be brought forward to reform the regulation of human embryology and to ensure that Britain remains at the forefront of medical research. My government wants all children to have the best possible start in life. There will be a bill to improve services for vulnerable children and young people, including those in care. My government will bring forward proposals to help people achieve a better balance between work and family life. Legislation will be introduced to enable unclaimed money in dormant bank accounts to be used for youth facilities, financial inclusion, and social investment. A bill will place a duty on every employer to contribute to good quality workplace pensions for their employees. My government is committed to protecting the environment and to tackling climate change, both at home and abroad. A bill will be brought forward to make the United Kingdom the first country in the world to introduce a legally binding framework to reduce carbon dioxide emissions. My government will introduce legislation to provide clean, secure, and affordable supplies of energy. There will be legislation to tackle congestion and improve public transport. Alongside measures to meet rising aspirations, my government will take further action to create stronger communities and tackle terrorism. Legislation to reform the criminal justice system will continue to be taken forward, with the aim of protecting the public and reducing reoffending. My government will publish a draft bill on citizenship. My government will seek a consensus on changes to the law on terrorism, so that the police and other agencies have the powers they need to protect the public whilst preserving essential rights and liberties. My government will pursue policies to secure a stable and strong economy with low inflation, sound public finances, and high levels of employment. Legislation will be brought forward to protect depositors and ensure confidence in the banking system. A bill will be introduced to reduce regulatory burdens on business. My government is committed to openness and accountability, and to a strong Parliament able to hold the government properly to account. Proposals will be brought forward to renew the constitutional settlement and strengthen the relationship between the government, Parliament, and the people. My government will bring forward proposals on the regulation of party finance and expenditure. Members of the House of Commons, estimates for the public services will be laid before you. My Lords and members of the House of Commons, my government will continue to work closely with the devolved administrations in the interests of all the people of the United Kingdom. My government will continue to work to build a prosperous and secure European Union, better able to respond to the challenges of globalization. Legislation will be brought forward to enable Parliament to approve the European Union Reform Treaty. Reducing global poverty will be a high priority for my government, with renewed efforts to achieve the Millennium Development Goals. The Duke of Edinburgh and I look forward to visiting Uganda later this month for the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting. My government will continue to work with the government of Iraq to deliver security, political reconciliation, and economic reconstruction. My government will continue to support the government of Afghanistan as it tackles extremism, instability, and the narcotics trade. My government will continue to work with the United Nations, G8, and European Union to prevent the spread of weapons of mass destruction, including addressing international concerns over Iran's nuclear intentions. My government will maintain Britain's strong commitment to reaching a lasting peace settlement between Israel and the Palestinians. Other measures will be laid before you. My Lords and members of the House of Commons, I pray that the blessing of Almighty God may rest upon your councils.
Chancellor Jack Straw retrieves the speech after his first outing as Lord Chancellor, and he did walk backwards down from the steps of the throne on presenting the speech, and it looks as if he's going to do so again. Pages gather up the Queen's Parliamentary robe, James Lindsay, George Fitzroy, Arthur Hussey and Henry Naylor, and the Queen bows to both sides of the House of Lords. The only occasion, of course, when the sovereign bows to someone else, except on the occasion of the funeral of Diana, Princess of Wales. Queen and Duke of Edinburgh pass through into Prince's Chamber, little ante-room between the Royal Gallery and the House of Lords itself. Magnificent view of the two thrones and the cloth of estate. Well, a long collection of bills. Some bills were announced by the Prime Minister in his statement in July the 11th, but let's just see the procession repass through the Royal Gallery, the Sword of State. Jack Straw said in his speech to the Labour Party conference that as part of the onward march of socialism he would not be wearing the wig, but he did say that was a joke. He also told me yesterday that rituals and symbols are extremely important in building society, and his decision to wear the uniform, I have a great respect of tradition, and it was the clear will of Parliament that the office of Lord Chancellor should continue. The Lord Chancellor part of his role is essentially responsible for the judicial appointments, court services, tribunals, crown dependencies. And the justice part is prisons and devolution. The Commons return, you just saw there briefly. Queen and Duke of Edinburgh head towards the robing room, and you just saw there the purse. And the purse was borne by Helen Astbury, as I failed to call her originally. She's the event secretary to the Lord Chancellor. Queen and Duke of Edinburgh pass through to the robing room. In the House of Commons, members pass back through. They don't stay. They almost walk straight through, go to the other side. They'll reassemble at 2:30 when they will debate the Queen's speech. Actually, first of all, they just give a first reading to the Outlawries Bill to show that they can talk about their business before that of the Queen. Keith Vaz passing through there. Theresa Villiers. And then two backbenchers will open the debate on the Queen's speech. The mover of the loyal address will be Richard Cabourn, Sheffield Central, Labour MP, former Minister of Sport. He fulfills the old stager role in this part of the proceedings. And then the seconder to the loyal address will be Dawn Butler, Labour MP for Brent South. And in the House of Lords, the peers prepare to take their leave. A number of bills we heard before, announced but in the pre-Queen's speech debate in the House of Commons by Gordon Brown in July the 11th, Climate Change Bill, Setting Targets, Constitutional Reform Bill, Counter-Terrorism Bill, Education Bills, Skills Bill, Energy Bill. But there were some new ones, Lord Faulkner.
Yes.
We had the legislation to protect investors and restore confidence in banking. I wonder why that's come about.
Well, obviously that's a response to the events of the summer. One can see the new bills indicate the government responding to the things that have been happening since they announced a draft Queen's speech in July of this year.
And a citizenship and immigration bill. There was always talk of a citizenship bill, but it has been allied now with immigration.
I think in July the proposal was a criminal justice and immigration bill. Immigration's been taken away from criminal justice and put in, as you say, with a citizenship bill. And I think that's to deal with issues like, should one have a point system for immigrants coming into this country?
The new Clerk of the Parliament's there, Michael Pownall on the left, and David Beamish, the Clerk Assistant. They've both just taken office. And Lord Faulkner's ex-Chief of Staff, really, the Permanent Secretary for Lord Chancellor, really, the Clerk of the Crown in Chancery. He is a great fan of the Grateful Dead. You, of course, can name every B-side of a 1960s hit single.
Oh, I'm not sure I can.
You used to be. That was your party trick.
Sure, that's
I'm
not
sorry
right.
you can't do that now. Lord Malloch Brown there on the left. An apprenticeship bill wasn't mentioned in Gordon Brown's pre-Queen's speech debate. Pre-Queen's speech debate. And legislation will also be introduced to enable Parliament to approve the EU Reform Treaty. On the Constitutional Reform Bill, that will give legal power for the House of Commons to have the final say on going to war and treaties. But it may also look at proposals on dissolution. The proposal is that the House of Commons would take a vote before the Prime Minister goes to Buckingham Palace to ask for a dissolution. Now, this has raised some eyebrows because the decision to grant a dissolution is a decision of the sovereigns. It's a personal power of the sovereigns. And my understanding from Buckingham Palace is that they were consulted. And indeed, that was one reason why the audience after Gordon Brown kissed hands on becoming Prime Minister was so long, because after meeting the Queen, he, together with the Queen's private secretary, talked about these issues for quite a long time, about half an hour. Well, no decision has been reached so far. The line of Buckingham Palace is that there is a constitutional framework in this country, and the Queen lives within that constitutional framework, and it's up to politicians to suggest changes. But other eyebrows have been raised because this is a personal power of the sovereign, and people wonder what will happen to the sovereign's power to appoint a Prime Minister. 99 times out of 100, it's no question who'll be Prime Minister. But if we ever move to a system of proportional representation, there might be more of a problem for the palace. And it may be they wish to get out of that problem in the future.
The last time we can remember when the Queen had any sense of a discretion was when Harold Macmillan resigned and Alec Douglas-Hume, because there was no electoral process within the Conservative Party, was selected by the Magic Circle. And the Queen had to take advice as to who to ask to form a government. Now, that problem won't arise. The problem might arise in the future where, for example, a government having done badly in an election wants immediately to have another election because there's some sort of hung parliament.
There was a lot of debate, wasn't there, in 1974, if Harold Wilson asked for a second dissolution, whether he should be granted it. The first dissolution asked for by Edward Heath. The question was, if Harold Wilson then asked, on taking up office in February 74, if he asked for a dissolution, should it be granted? I think the view of the palace was, we gave a dissolution to Ted Heath, we should give one to Harold Wilson if he requests one.
But the question never arose because he formed a government and then lasted for, I think, from February until October.
It was a question of that dissolution,
yes,
whether that should be granted. The sense I get from Buckingham Palace is that actually probably the sovereign would never refuse a direct request for a dissolution, but there have been occasions, certainly in the last century, where it is well known that the sovereign, shall we say, dissuaded the Prime Minister from putting the question. Well, here is the Queen, accompanied by the Lord Great Chamberlain, as she leaves her palace. It's still her palace, the Royal Gallery, robing room, very much public. She's talking to the Lord Chancellor. Oh, she's pointing to the purse.
What's in there, she's saying?
How do you think the Lord Chancellor did on his first outing?
I thought extraordinarily well. I think the test for your first outing is not falling over. And he failed to fall over at any stage. Therefore, he passed with flying colours, in my view.
All right, we'll have to mark him out of 10, really, won't we?
Well, 10 out of 10, in my view.
What could be higher praise from the immediate past Lord Chancellor than to grant the present incumbent 10 out of 10?
And there was no delay in handing Her Majesty the speech.
For which I think she was deeply relieved. The Queen now walks down the Norman staircase, and the Duke of Edinburgh alongside her. The Duke of Edinburgh has been concerned, I gather, about the people waiting in the Royal Gallery in this morning's ceremony for the long waits until things happen, and has even suggested that there should be a small band or a string section of an orchestra in the Royal Gallery to keep people entertained. So I don't know whether consideration will be given to that. The Kings of Arms. The head of the furnishings at the Palace of Westminster, just back there in his morning suit. Queen exchanges a word with Blackrod. Queen returns to the Irish state coach. Let's hope that Daniel, Stevenson, McCarthy and St Anton, the four Greys, have had something nourishing to eat while they were waiting on duty here. It's quite a manoeuvre turning this coach round after it's arrived at the Palace of Westminster. It goes into a little courtyard just to the left of the screen, and considerable amount of time is spent taking it through a rather large turning circle. Back in the House of Lords, we can see it's actually rather empty now, and most of the peers have dispersed. If we see in the House of Lords, they've nearly all gone. Packed it was, but now fairly empty. A last few stragglers just going. But let's return back to the Victoria Tower and the coach, which is ready to go. The Queen has been to perhaps the world's finest neo-Gothic building this morning, Barry and Pugin's Palace of Westminster. This evening, she will go to another great neo-Gothic building, the one designed by George Gilbert Scott, St Pancras Station. Maybe not the second best in the world, certainly the second best in London. The Union flag replaces the Royal Standard above the Victoria Tower as the Queen has left. And at St Pancras this evening she will formally open, or should we say reopen, St Pancras Station. And that will be quite a ceremony, I would have thought, this evening, a building which has been beautifully restored to its former glory. The National Anthem plays, and that draws us to the end of business here at Westminster. Please rejoin us on BBC Parliament at 2:30 when the Queen's speech will be debated in the House of Commons, with Gordon Brown leading off as Prime Minister for the government. Now the regalia leaves the Palace of Westminster, the imperial state crown once again on its small cushion as it returns to the Queen Alexandra coach. Lord Faulkner, for the last at least 4 years you took part in the procession. What was it like to watch it?
Incredibly impressive. It's done so well. The night before we have a rehearsal, you were there. It's always a shambles the night before. The Queen is the most experienced person at doing this ceremony. The moment she comes into the Palace of Westminster, everybody's standards go shooting up, and you see the most perfect ceremony, bringing all of our constitution together impeccably. It's an absolutely moving and brilliant ceremony to watch.
And as Lord Chancellor, of course, you have quite a lot of dealings with the Queen, actual dealings with the sovereign, things like prerogative of mercy, swearing of bishops. Maybe you could tell me something about that.
Yes, the Lord Chancellor, for example, attends when each bishop, when newly appointed, comes to the monarch to swear his allegiance to the monarch as the head of state, making it clear that Henry VIII's Reformation did really work and there was no allegiance to Rome anymore. And the Queen, by a million miles, is the most experienced taker part in these sorts of ceremonies and also understander of the Constitution.
Do people feel nervous in her presence?
Very nervous, but she puts everybody at her ease. She's incredibly impressive.
So we now see the final parts of the regalia going on board. It's a double-handed sword, the sword of state, one of a number in the Tower of London. There's only one cap of maintenance now, and in fact cap of maintenance lives in a desk in the Duke of Edinburgh's study. I don't know what it does there the rest of the year, but it comes out for this one occasion per year. Well, we shall say farewell from the state opening of Parliament for 2007. A lot of legislation to discuss. Please join us at 2:30 this afternoon for that debate live on BBC Parliament, and we hope very much you've enjoyed this morning's proceedings. Goodbye.